Off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, September 12, 1857. 30,000 pounds of California gold is about to hit the bottom of the Atlantic, and New York banks are waiting for that gold to calm a panic. In the cargo hold of a wooden sidewheel steamer are 21 tons of California gold, roughly 30,000 pounds of bullion and coin. The gold is consigned to commercial banks in New York. The ship is also carrying 578 people. The ship is taking water. The captain has just ordered the women and children into the only boats. His name is William Herndon. He is 43 years old. He is a captain of the United States Mail Steamship Company. He has been at sea for 3 days through the worst Atlantic hurricane of the year. The lifeboats reach a passing brigantine called the Marine and a Norwegian bark called the Ellen. Together they take 153 people aboard. The storm closes over everyone left. 425 people will die that night. Herndon will be the last man on the bridge. The ship will go down 1,900 fathoms, about 7,200 feet, straight to the seabed. 4 days later, the news reaches New York via the overland telegraph from Charleston, the morning of September 16, 1857. The New York Herald runs the story above the fold. The New York Times runs it on the front. The bankers on Wall Street, reading their copies over coffee, already had a problem. They had been bleeding deposits for 3 weeks since the failure of an Ohio insurance company in late August. They had been counting on the Central America's gold to settle the autumn accounts. The gold is now 7,200 feet straight down. By Monday morning, the run that had been forming will spread. Within 4 weeks, every bank in New York will suspend specie payments. To understand why a single shipment of gold mattered to a New York bank in 1857, start 8 years earlier. The discovery at Sutter's Mill in 1849 produced the largest peacetime population movement in American history. By the late 1850s, San Francisco was a major Pacific port. California gold was being shipped, in increasing volume, to refineries on the East Coast. The route was Panama. The Panama Railroad opened in 1855. It compressed a 4-month Cape Horn voyage into 3 weeks. By the time the Central America sailed, roughly $300 million in California gold had crossed Panama in 8 years. Most of it ended up in New York commercial banks. The average consignment ran $5 to $6 million a month. Banks treated the in-transit gold as a near-cash asset. They booked the receivable the day the ship sailed. The Panama route in 1857 was the wire transfer made physical. The Central America sailed Aspinwall on the 3rd of September, 1857. 578 passengers and crew. 21 tons of California gold. Captain Herndon took the con. The ship was a 280-foot wooden sidewheel steamer, 4 years old, in regular service between Aspinwall and New York. It was a respectable ship. Its sister vessels included the SS George Law and the SS Adriatic. None of them, that morning, was a particularly old or particularly weak vessel. The ship called at Havana on September 7th for coal. Some of the passengers were returning California miners with private purses of gold dust and coin. Some were merchant families. Some were U.S. Mail Steamship Company crew. They had no reason to think the next leg, Havana to New York, would be different from any of the dozens of similar legs the ship had completed. On the morning of September 9th, 2 days out of Havana, the barometer began to fall. Herndon recorded the pressure drop in the ship's log. The first officer brought up the additional sail rigging. By dusk on September 9th, the ship was running before the wind. By the morning of September 11th, the wind was a full hurricane. The Central America was no longer making for New York. The Central America was trying to stay afloat. The fullest contemporary account is in Harper's Weekly of the 26th of September, 1857. The reporter had interviewed survivors aboard the rescue vessel Marine. The narrative they gave was specific. By the afternoon of the 12th of September, the ship's pumps had failed. The boilers were out. The ship was rolling in seas Herndon and his officers estimated at 30 feet. Herndon ordered the women and children to the lifeboats first. The men formed lines on the deck and helped the boats over the side. The brigantine Marine, sailing past, hove to and took the lifeboats aboard. The Norwegian bark Ellen, an hour later, picked up survivors clinging to floating debris. 425 people died that night. Most of them were men who had stayed on deck after the women and children were aboard the lifeboats. They went down with the ship. Captain Herndon was the last man on the bridge. Survivor accounts in Harper's Weekly describe him standing in his uniform, hands at his sides, as the ship listed and the bridge went underwater. The wreck would not be located again for 131 years. Among the rescued was a woman named Adeline Easton. Her husband and her 2 adult sons stayed on deck. None of them survived. She wrote a long letter to her sister 3 weeks later that survives in the Harvard manuscript collection. The phrase she used to describe Herndon's command of the deck after the storm broke was, in her letter, that he had behaved as though he had been preparing to die for a long time. On the morning the steamer was sailing from Aspinwall, the New York banking system already had a problem. The wreck did not break the banking system. It made the cracks visible at the moment they could not afford to be seen. 3 years after the wreck, the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis dedicated a granite monument to Captain Herndon. It still stands. The monument is a tall granite obelisk in the center of the Academy's main yard. The inscription names William Lewis Herndon, captain of the SS Central America, lost at sea September 12, 1857. Beneath the name, a single line reads, "He saved his passengers and ship's company at the cost of his own life." The phrase is plain. The Naval Academy had been founded 15 years earlier. The Herndon Monument was, in the Academy's institutional memory, the first explicit honor to a graduate of the Merchant Marine Service. The phrase that survivors attributed to Herndon as he refused the last lifeboat, "Tell my wife I never lost the ship," has been carried in popular accounts for over a century. It does not appear in the contemporary newspaper coverage. The fact log for this episode treats it as legend until verified. The wreck was lost for 131 years. Salvage attempts in the 1880s failed. The depth was beyond their technology. A century later, Tommy Thompson assembled the Columbus America Discovery Group, raised capital from 161 Ohio investors, and applied Bayesian search theory to the survivor accounts. On the morning of September 11, 1988, his team located the wreck at 7,200 feet. The wreck was almost exactly where the math had said it would be. By 1991, total recovery was approximately 1.5 tons of gold, 500 ingots, and 7,500 coins. The numismatic value of the recovered period coins exceeded their bullion weight by an order of magnitude. The recovery hero became a fugitive. In 2012, the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio indicted Tommy Thompson for his failure to compensate the 161 Ohio investors who had funded the original recovery. He was arrested in 2015 and spent nearly a decade in prison before his release in March 2026. The 500 missing coins remained unaccounted for. In 2014, Odyssey Marine Exploration conducted a follow-up recovery under court supervision, 45 more bars, 15,500 more coins. The Ohio investors at last were paid. The wreck did not cause the panic of 1857. The wreck accelerated an existing one. A banking system already losing deposits, already short on autumn liquidity, already nervous about Ohio life, lost a single shipment of gold and the public confidence to hold the system together for another month. The wreck was a confidence shock. The shock landed at the worst possible moment. The system broke 27 days later. This is one of the coins that came up. It sat at the bottom of the Atlantic for 131 years. It is worth more now on the numismatic market than the New York banks who had been counting on it had in their entire specie reserve in the autumn of 1857. A man went down with his ship to save it. The bank it was meant to save broke anyway.